Governor Ron DeSantis was in South Florida on Friday, making the case for a change in the way that voters get their mail-in ballots.
The governor and supporters want voters to request ballots for every general election, they say, to tighten security. Opponents say that just adds another hurdle to voting. And here to talk about that and other goings-on in Tallahassee, State Representative Jenne of Dania Beach, co-Democratic leader in the State House, and Senator Manny Diaz of Hialeah, part of the Republican leadership and chair of the State Education Committee as well. Good morning, gentlemen.
Gentlemen, welcome. We are glad you are here.
Good morning. Great to be with you this morning.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Sure. Senator Diaz, let me begin with you, and I want you both to comment here. After years of being the butt of late-night comedian jokes about how terrible our elections are, last November, Florida pulled off an absolutely perfect election. More than 4 million people voted by mail. Now we've got the governor saying, hey, we need to improve the system and make it a little bit harder, as it were, to get those mail-in ballots. Representative Jenne, what's your reaction to this?
Well, my reaction to it is, quite frankly, I'm not quite sure why we want to do that. Florida's being held up as an example of the way you want your elections run. And quite frankly, we've been under control of one party for almost the last 25 to 30 years. So all of the system that we're looking at right now that apparently needs, according to the governor, some sort of rewrite, was created by the party that's currently in control. I happen to think the election went incredibly smoothly in the state of Florida, and not quite sure why we want to make it more difficult for anyone to vote as long as they are a legal registered voter.
Senator Manny Diaz, please do react to that. And I just want to throw in there that the supervisors of elections, they don't seem to favor this because, for no partisan reason, they just don't, they say it's unnecessary, more work to do. What do you say?
Well, I think we did have a smooth election night, November 2020, and I think we've improved in Florida. Every cycle we've made tweaks to improve since the issue that we had in 2000 with the hanging chads and all those things. I think continuously reviewing these policies and making sure that we take what's happened in other states and make sure it doesn't happen to us here. It's a continuous improvement model. It's not to make voting harder. I mean, to say that voting hard is in Florida is a bit disingenuous from anyone who would say that, because we have, over a month of voting. We have plenty of early voting with ample time for people and ample sites, and our mail-in ballot system has evolved. Making sure that that's secure and that there's no fraud. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And again, continually improving our system is the way to make sure that we continue to have these smooth election nights.
Yeah, Senator Diaz, here is the argument about why it makes it harder currently. If you sign up for a mail-in ballot, you are qualified to automatically get one for 2 general election cycles. You just simply get it in the mail. What the governor and what the legislature is proposing is to make it just every single election you must apply again. Now, doesn't that add sort of a level of difficulty to something that we really should make easy?
Well, look, initially absentee ballots in Florida were only allowed for people that had an excuse. And I think it is a responsibility, a civic responsibility of voters to pay attention to what's going on. And if they want to have the ease of voting through mail, that's perfectly fine. And we've done it well in Florida. But I think we need to make sure that we eliminate possibilities for there to be fraud that we've seen in other states where they've had newer programs with mail-in ballots. Yeah. And people may have received ballots that didn't order them or don't live there anymore. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that we're on top of things and making sure it's going correctly. Having folks order ballots for either a full cycle, which is a primary and a general, or something like that, I think is perfectly feasible. And again, this bill is a work in progress, and we'll see what happens as it goes through the legislative process.
So, Jenne, the bill came out of committee, one of the committees this week, 5-4, right down party lines. Why is this a partisan issue if these rules apply to everybody? Everyone of every party and no party at all follow the same rules. Why is this so partisan?
Well, unfortunately, it's due to just political and partisan gridlock. I think that Senator Diaz has made some valid points. We had a very smooth November here in the state of Florida. I also think Mr. Putney made a valid point as well when we're talking about the ease of voting and having to do something over and over again every single cycle. But I think at the end of the day, Florida came off without a hitch, and there's no reason to go back and tweak that. I think that if you look in terms of just partisanship, which I want to try to avoid as much as possible, but if you look in terms of partisanship, for years and years and years, the Republican Party held a great advantage in mail-in ballots coming into the state. This year, that changed a bit. Democrats had a better vote-by-mail turnout. I hope that's not the reason why, but I know some of my colleagues are saying that it does smell of that.
Yeah. If we can, Governor DeSantis was in West Palm Beach on Friday, really laid out the case for these changes. We want to play a little bit of what the governor had to say.
And so we don't want any ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. And we're going to make sure, again, we're not a big ballot harvesting state as it is, but any type of loopholes or any type of room where that could be abused, we want to make sure that we address it.
Yeah, just to sort of lay it out there, ballot harvesting, as the governor probably was going to say, involves people who go out and go to mainly long-term care facilities, old age homes, and help people fill out their ballots. This used to happen, at least in Miami-Dade, every year back in the 1990s, early 2000, and sometimes then the vote broker would have a handful of ballots and deliver them to the elections department. But, Senator Diaz, that's illegal now. Only a family member can handle the ballot of somebody else. So we don't really have ballot harvesting anymore, do we?
Well, that's a county ordinance. There's questions as to does that rule apply outside of Miami-Dade or who it applies to. There's a lot of gray area in that. I think you've seen less of that over the years compared to what we saw in the 80s and 90s. But it does lead to the concern that if someone in one of those long-term care facilities or in that kind of situation orders ballots, could it be that they should be able to receive it for the primary and the general and not have it go on for 2, 3, or 4 years? I think that's the question there of maintaining the integrity of that process. Obviously, campaigns receive the information of who votes and voters that are out there. And both sides do a very good job of making sure that they reach out to voters to provide the opportunity for either vote by mail or voting in person early or on election day. There's a lot of that during the cycle. Believe me, we see it all the time where it's advertised and communicated.
Forgive me if I missed this. I heard what the governor said. I heard what you said. I don't think ballot harvesting is part of this bill, is it?
It depends what version of the bill we end up, but and it depends the definition of ballot harvesting. When you look at ballot harvesting, as Mr. Putney mentioned before, you were talking about having ballots picked up. In Miami-Dade, there is an ordinance in reference to who can actually touch a ballot, who can pick up a ballot. Right. So I think that's already in place.
My question is, in this bill going through, Senate Bill 90 does not address ballot harvesting at all that I've seen, unless I'm missing one of the amendments. But what it does also include, it actually codifies what Governor DeSantis did in this last election, give more time to the supervisors of elections to count the vote by mail ballots. So Evan, Jenny, by all accounts, everyone thought that was a good thing.
Yeah, no, and I think the governor said it there himself in the clip that was just played. We don't have a ballot harvesting problem right now in the state of Florida. I think ultimately what those are, there are a lot of people really on both sides of the aisle that are claiming different levels of fraud and election fraud in this past November 2020 cycle. So I just worry that doing that are going to stoke people's fears and their phobias that something nefarious is going on with our electoral system just to throw red meat at a base. The bill itself, we'll have to take a look and really get into it. That vote that you discussed earlier took place in the Senate and not in the House. But I have genuine concerns about the direction that we're pointing in, and filing bills, writing bills just to get your base riled up. I don't think is the way that our legislature should be moving, and I'm concerned that's exactly what this is. You have a bill say one thing, and then a major proponent of the bill come out and basically say, yeah, and we're worried about this other stuff that actually isn't addressed in the bill. I don't think it's good policy making. Woulda, coulda, shouldas do not belong in our state statutes. We need to rely on solid evidence and move policies forward that are going to address those issues, whether they may or may not be there. But I just think that this is red meat for a base that is hungry to believe that there was nefarious actions and actors.
Evan, hold on just a minute. If you and Manny Diaz hold your spots, we're going to come back. Much more to talk about. The Florida legislature convenes in early March. We can talk more about that when we come back. Welcome back. On this Sunday, we are talking about the upcoming session of the legislature with State Representative Jenne of Dania Beach and State Senator Manny Diaz Jr. of Hialeah. And by the way, gentlemen, feel free to call me Michael. You don't have to call me Mr. Putney.
We call him the senator around here. You can do that too.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Jenne calls me Mr. Putney because he went to high school with my daughter. But Evan, thank you very much for that deference. But
not a problem, Michael.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's move on to the other, I think, one of the other really big bills in this legislative session. The short-term name is the Antimob bill, formerly known as the Combating Violence, Disorder, and Looting and Law Enforcement Protection Act. And Senator Diaz, this ostensibly is a consequence of demonstrations that happened last summer in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, a few other places. Black Lives Matter people were in the streets. But, those were, for the most part, peaceful. We're looking at video from a night in Miami where, in fact, it was not so peaceful. What is the rationale for this bill? Why is this needed?
Yeah, and this bill is not designed to address peaceful demonstrations. We're all in agreement of the First Amendment. We're all in agreement that people should be able to gather, demonstrate, and do so peacefully and be heard. The problem is what we've seen in other parts of the country, and what we saw some nights, unfortunately, here in some places in Florida, is when some elements infiltrate those demonstrations, or sometimes they do it separately after they use the demonstration as a guise to then get in and start to destroy personal property, to start to attack police officers, even first responders, or just regular citizens that are going about their daily lives. So I think there's been a lot of talk about trying to prevent demonstrations. This is not what the bill is about. And once it gets through the process, you'll see that the bill is about protecting property, life, and still preserving the First Amendment rights of those people that want to demonstrate peacefully. Oftentimes, those the peaceful demonstrators get lumped in, and actually their perception gets hurt of what they're doing because of other folks that have decided to get involved in these other kind of activities, or maybe even outside groups that have come in and got in at the tail end of those demonstrations.
You know, a lot of the crimes that are addressed in the bill are already on the criminal statutes. Evan, Jenne, there's a new class of crimes. Some of the penalties are toughened up. Listening to that rationale, what's wrong with cracking down on people who might use freedom of expression to do those kind of crimes?
Well, first of all, I would never advocate or forgive, or, well, perhaps forgive, but I would never advocate for anyone that was intentionally at a protest to agitate it to the point of violence. That's first. But secondly, I think there are a couple key points that were just made. As we heard, we really didn't have the level of violence and looting and mobbing and everything else that we saw in different areas of the country. We are state legislators. We are making laws for and based on Floridians. The refrain that I've heard time and time again is that this bill was based on things that never happened in the state of Florida whatsoever. They are addressing concerns from places on the west coast of the United States, not the west coast of Florida. So I think it has a very chilling effect on a very specific minority community, and that chilling effect has made people feel, and members of the of religious institutions all the way down to labor activists have expressed real grave concerns about the chilling effect this is going to have on people wanting to protest. There are laws on the books for anything that you can point to that happened in the state of Florida this summer. If a police officer was assaulted, that person needs to go to and be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. If someone is vandalizing and throwing trash cans through through large glass plate windows, that person needs to be arrested as well for destruction of personal property. We have laws on the books for all of this, but again, I think it goes back to a partisan thing where we're trying to get one particular portion of the populace worked up and in favor of something that we really don't need.
Senator Diaz, before we let you go, you chair the Education Committee. There are bills, one of your bills, as a matter of fact, sort of takes the voucher programs right now, makes it a little easier for parents to get through them. There is expansion of school choice as one of those perennial debates in the legislature for those pro and con. But now in this time of COVID, public schools, when possibly thousands of students are not going back to public schools because of COVID-related issues, and that will most certainly mean that they will not be eligible for millions of dollars in state funding. Talk a little bit about what you foresee coming down the pike as far as public schools and Florida's push to expand the voucher and school choice programs.
Well, Glenn, I'm actually, I had chaired the Senate Education Committee. I currently chair the Senate Health Committee, but I'm still involved in education as the vice chair of Education Appropriations. And I think number one issue is across the state, we're looking to figure out, not only for financial reasons, but where these students have gone. Have they gone to private school? Have they gone to homeschool? Why haven't those changes been registered in the regular withdrawal process? And I think obviously this is a big product of COVID. Have they left the state, left the county? The bill that we're talking about is actually a consolidation bill that consolidates a lot of the scholarship programs that we have across the state and streamline the application process. It's not really an expansion of the program, more of a consolidation and provides consistency and streamlining. We've seen, especially during COVID, that a lot of parents have been paying more attention to their child's education, especially because they've been doing it at their dining room table. And a lot of parents have expressed an interest in being able to get involved in their child's education. And this bill allows for more parent involvement and steering of some of those services. But again, I think that the number one issue that we need to deal with is across the state, school districts have been held harmless throughout this period based on their projected enrollment. In other words, where were the students that were supposed to arrive in the fall at the school and get funded? A lot of those didn't, and schools were held harmless. But going into next year, the concern is in the fall. What happens if these students don't start showing up at these school districts or at these schools? And what happens with the funding that doesn't come with them? And how does that impact the number of teachers we have in the school, employees, et cetera?
Right. Yeah, we're talking about a decision, a moment worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It is big. Representative Evan Jenne, great to have you on the show. Good to see you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Senator Manny Diaz Jr., thank you as always. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you both.